Merci. Bonsoir tout le monde. On est en direct de Pékin. Écoutez, on vient de terminer notre mission commerciale ici en Chine. Notre mission commerciale était focalisée sur les services financiers. Ça fait partie de mettre en action la vision qui a été mise de l'avant par le Premier ministre Carney lors de sa visite et la rencontre qu'il a eue avec le président Xi. Je dois dire qu'on a eu des conversations constructives, des conversations sérieuses pour justement mettre en place cette vision-là de doubler ou d'augmenter de 50% d'ici à 2030 les exportations canadiennes vers la Chine. Comme je dis souvent, si on veut augmenter nos exportations, on doit évidemment être présent dans le marché. Et les services financiers, c'est une des façons de faciliter le commerce également des marchandises. Donc, je vous dirais une bonne visite avec beaucoup aussi de nos collègues du secteur financier. On avait le PDG de Sun Life, de Manulife, des représentants des grandes banques canadiennes. Et je pense que si vous leur parlez, vous allez voir que c'est un point tournant dans leur positionnement sur le marché chinois. Beaucoup d'entre eux sont déjà présents ici depuis certains des décennies, voire dans certains cas quasiment un siècle. Alors, le Canada a beaucoup à offrir en termes d'expérience, d'expertise en matière de services financiers, en matière de gestion des placements, en matière de gestion des fonds de pension. Alors, la rencontre que j'ai eue avec le vice-premier ministre, je vous dirais, a été très bonne aussi. Je pense qu'il voit l'intérêt de continuer de s'engager de façon constructive avec le Canada. Et c'est justement ce qu'on voulait, c'est l'objectif qu'on voulait atteindre, c'est de poursuivre le dialogue qui avait été entamé par le Premier ministre Carney. So we just finished our mission here in Beijing. It's 8 o'clock, very full 2 days. This was really, our trade mission was really focused on financial services. This is really putting the vision of Prime Minister Carney in action. You remember when Prime Minister Carney came here in Beijing and met President Xi Jinping, he set the goal to increase our export by 50% by 2030. Financial services are a key enabler to increase our trade with China. We were joined in this mission. I was joined by the governor of the Bank of Canada, the superintendent of financial institutions, CEOs of Manulife, Sun Life, and representative of many of the banks in Canada. I think if you speak to them, they would tell you this was a turning point. Most of them have already been operating in the Chinese market, some of them for decades, some of them for over a century. But what they would tell you is that the discussions we had, the meeting I had with Vice Premier He, and the discussion I had also with the Minister of Finance, this is all going to be very useful for them to increase their activities here in China. I think the Chinese understand that Canada has a lot to offer when it comes to experience and expertise in the financial sectors, in wealth management, in pension management. So I think this is really putting the vision in action that has been set by the Prime Minister. So this is going to be part of the engagement that we're going to have. I expect also the Vice Premier to come visit Canada as part of this new dialogue that we have started. So this was a very fruitful mission. And with that, I'll stop here and I'll just turn over to you and happy to take your question. Merci.
Thank you. We will now start the question and answer period. We have 15 minutes today, so we will keep one question per person. Please identify yourself and your outlet. Feel free to ask the question in the official language of your choice. Merci, Monsieur le ministre. Nous allons maintenant passer à la période de questions et réponses. Comme nous avons 15 minutes, ce sera une seule question par personne. S'il vous plaît, vous identifier ainsi que votre média affilié. Vous pouvez poser la question dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Nous allons donc commencer avec Rahim. Over to you, Rahim.
Go ahead, Rahim. We cannot hear you. Might be on mute.
Yeah. You will need to unmute yourself.
Hello, Minister Champagne. Happy Good Friday. Hope you're well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I know it's early for you, but it's late for me.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Raheem Ahmed, National Post. During your visit to China, have you at all discussed the issue of forced labor or more broadly human rights related issues?
We did speak about supply chain integrity. That was a core message that I conveyed to our Chinese counterpart to say that obviously Canada puts a lot of importance on supply chain integrity and that our bilateral trade need to be conducted in accordance with international standards. So this is a point that I made very clearly to different counterparts that we've met here in China during our visit.
Thank you. On va maintenant passer à Olivier Boisse.
Olivier, on vous entend pas.
Oui, m'entendez-vous maintenant?
Oui, on vous entend. Allez-y.
Bonjour, M. Champagne.
Ça fait plaisir.
Je me demandais si, durant vos rencontres, durant vos discussions, il a été question de la guerre en Iran, des impacts sur les marchés, sur le pétrole. Et selon ce que vous avez pu entendre, quelle est la position des Chinois là-dessus?
Ben, c'est ça. Merci d'abord pour votre question. C'est sûr que dans le contexte des discussions que j'ai eues avec nos homologues chinois, le contexte géopolitique, géoéconomique mondial a fait partie de nos discussions. Comme souvent, la vitesse à laquelle le monde change, autant au niveau de la rapidité et de l'étendue des changements, c'est un peu sans précédent. Si le monde était incertain en 2025, je dis souvent en 2026, il est devenu volatile et complexe. Donc oui, on a exploré certains enjeux, l'impact par exemple sur le marché du pétrole et du gaz, mais aussi ce que j'ai fait valoir à la partie chinoise, c'était tout l'intérêt de discuter avec le Canada parce que vous savez, dans un contexte où les gens veulent diversifier leurs sources d'approvisionnement, ben, le Canada offre la stabilité, la prévisibilité, la primauté du droit. Donc, on devient un partenaire de choix en matière d'énergie. Et je pense que les Chinois le voient bien aussi. Certainement, les projets qui vont de l'avant au Canada, qui existent déjà, puis ceux qui vont aller de l'avant au Canada, ben, on nous positionne d'une façon stratégique parce que je dis souvent, la sécurité énergétique, c'est la sécurité nationale. Plusieurs des pays dans cette partie-là du monde importent du pétrole, du gaz, et certainement, ils voient dans le Canada un partenaire stratégique pour leurs nécessités énergétiques. Alors, ça nous a permis aussi de mettre ça en lumière durant nos conversations ici à Pékin.
Merci. We'll now go to David. Please unmute yourself.
Good morning, Minister Champagne. Yes,
good morning.
Yesterday...
It's fairly evening for me, but I know it's morning for you.
Yeah, not too early. Anyway, though, yesterday you may have seen Pierre Poilievre saying the Conservatives want to see the government get rid of taxes on gasoline for the remainder of the year, just citing the conflict of Iran and the issues in the Strait of Hormuz. We've previously seen the Liberal government bring on a tax holiday when affordability was challenged. I was looking at the prepaid meals, restaurant, and liquor tax holiday last year. Is doing a bit of a tax holiday for gas something the government is open to at this point, just given the price shocks we're seeing and the broader affordability challenges across Canada?
Well, thank you for your question. As you know, we've done a lot on affordability. It's always top of mind. I mean, we've done that on the grocery side. We've done that with respect to early learning and childcare. We've done that with a number of benefits that we have provided to Canadians because the point was about kind of providing them a boost and a bridge until circumstances and the growth that we expect in the Canadian economy would materialize. We're monitoring the situation very carefully. You know, we had a G7 call with Finance Minister, Energy Minister, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the International Energy Agency, and the OECD. And honestly, it is a very volatile and fast-changing set of circumstances. Everyone is looking at what would be the duration of the conflict in the Middle East, what would be the impact on the primary prices with respect to diesel, jet fuel, home heating oil, and obviously gasoline. So we're monitoring, I would say at this particular point of time, what we're doing is monitoring the situation across the country, looking at the refining capacity that we're seeing and the prices associated with that, and also consulting with our other G7 partner because like I said, this is a very complex set of circumstances. It's fast changing, but certainly we are very mindful of the impact on Canadians, and we will continue to monitor the situation for now and see how much of what we see on the global market is going to be reflected and to which extent in the Canadian price of gasoline.
Thank you. I think this will be the last question from Benjamin. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, Minister. Thanks very much for your time today. Just a very quick question. Has the Chinese government given you any indication about the status of the pork tariffs and whether those will come down anytime soon, the retaliatory tariffs on Canadian pork?
Well, that's a very good question. I did raise pork very specifically in the discussion. Listen, the dialogue that we have provided and the framework that has been established is basically like a clearinghouse for issues that arise in the trading relationship. Our trading relationship is around 120 billion. If you look at the size of the Canadian economy and the size of the Chinese economy, it should be much higher than that. That's why Prime Minister Carney said we want to boost our export by 50% by 2030. And part of my message to the Chinese side was really we need to get to a point where we remove these trade irritants that exist between Canada and China, and so that we can look at also the broader vision that has been put forward and say, let's focus on the trading aspect and increasing our trade when our interests align. And therefore, I think this is a message that I made very loud and clear to the Chinese side. And like I said, if you want to diversify and if you want to do that seriously, you obviously have to engage with your second largest trading partner, which happens to be China, which also happens to be the second largest economy in the world. And going back to one of the previous questions we had, I think that when it comes to energy, there's certainly a lot of interest from the Chinese side, and therefore we're going to continue the discussion. This was the launch, basically, of a dialogue that the Prime Minister and President Xi have agreed in their summit in January. And honestly, I think this is going to be a very constructive discussion, but we will need to continue to push to remove these trade irritants so that the broader vision of increasing the trade between our two countries is accomplished. Maybe we should take one or two more questions because I feel it's been a bit short. I know it's late. Well, it's early for you. It's late for some of the folks here who I'm supposed to do a press conference also waiting in the corridor, but I appreciate it's been a bit short. So maybe why don't we take another 3 question, operator, just to make sure that we can give a chance to our colleagues back in Canada the opportunity to ask a question.
Okay, I'm hearing that Bloomberg Curtis may have a question. Curtis, are you able to unmute yourself, please?
Curtis, we're keen to hear from you, but you need to unmute yourself. You want to move on to someone else and we come back to Curtis after?
Yes, let's do that. Ian, over to you.
We can hear you, Ian.
Hi. No, now it works.
Yes, go ahead, Ian.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Were there any substantive discussions around Chinese auto industry investment in Canada?
No, we did not speak about the auto sector per se. A lot of our discussion, our mission was really focused on financial services. And I'll tell you why, because financial services is the way to enable trade in goods. And therefore, we wanted to build on the foundation. If we have a more fluid trade in services, and in particular financial services, that is going to be enabling the trade that we want to see when it comes to merchandise and achieving the vision of increasing by 50% by 2030. And I would say if you want to diversify, you need to show up. I mean, this was pretty clear in our mission here with the Governor of Bank of Canada, the Superintendent of Financial Institution. You cannot credibly expect to diversify your trade, which is something that Canada said we will double our overseas trade over the next 10 years. If you want to trade, you need to show up. And I think this was well received by the Chinese side because they saw that we are serious, we are focused, and we are pragmatic in how we want to engage with eyes wide open. It was very clear where we can trade when the interest of Canada and China would align, but also what is off for now. And therefore, I think openness, frankness is key in saying this is what we want to do, this is what we can do, and this is not. This is, for example, sectors where we're not going to engage because our interests do not align. And I think that was very clear and made very clear to the Chinese side as well. So there's a lot of opportunities in the sectors that we have identified where we're talking about energy, we talked about tourism, we talked about financial services, wealth management, pension management, the banking sector. So there is a lot for us to work on together. And I think the clarity of our message was well received by the Chinese side. I think they understand clearly the areas where we can do more together and the approach that Canada is taking with respect to trade.
Thank you. We will now go to you, Greg Quinn.
Hello.
Greg. Yes,
Hi.
go ahead, sir.
I'm sure you weren't reading too much local press while you're doing important things in China, but there were two reports about Canada's fiscal situation. The CD Howe suggested that the military spending might require tax increases, even to the GST, that kind of scale. And the Canadian Federation of Independent Business suggested that deficits need to come down substantially because, excuse me, entrepreneurs are worried that they're going to be stuck with paying the costs of expanded government spending. Can you give us any kind of flavor of how your pending budget or budgets might make people who are concerned about the deficit happy?
Well, I mean, I would certainly, I mean, I respect their opinion, but I would respectfully suggest as well that Canada has one of the best fiscal position in the G7, particularly now in the context that we live. I mean, like I said, if the world was uncertain in 2025, it is volatile and complex in 2026. Now, if you look at Canada, we are a net exporter of oil and gas. So we are in a stronger position than most of our G7 colleagues. And therefore, I would say that the sustainability of the Canadian finances is assured. I was talking also with our colleagues in the G7 earlier this week, and it's clear that the fiscal position of Canada is widely regarded as one of the most solid in the G7. Let's remind ourselves that Canada is the second fastest growing economy in the G7. Canada has the lowest net debt to GDP in the G7. Canada has one of the lowest deficit to GDP in the G7. And we are one of the two countries with Germany with a AAA credit rating in the G7. When you enter a period of uncertainty like we're seeing now, and you have strong fundamentals, I would put it to them that Canada is in a much better position than pretty much every other G7 nation to face the headwind that the world is seeing. We have strong fundamentals. We have a budget which is making generational investments in the kind of things that will grow the economy, whether you talk about infrastructure, talk about housing, talk about productivity and innovation, talk about defense. And you don't need to take it from me. I mean, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, was pretty clear that there's really two countries in the G7 who can weather what we're seeing now, and it's Canada and Germany. So I want to reassure every Canadian, we are in a solid fiscal position. We are very serious in our approach to spending. That's why in budget 2025, we said we're going to spend less so we can invest more, and we were able to identify $60 billion of savings, which compares very well to what previous government have done. So, we understand that Canadians had to tighten their belt over the last few years, and the federal government had to do exactly the same. But let's keep in perspective that Canada is on the strongest financial footing to weather the challenges that we're seeing ahead. And I would say that's why you've seen record level of foreign direct investment in Canada. And that's why you're seeing so many countries looking at Canada as a supplier of energy at a time where the world is looking for diversification, and Canada offers unparalleled stability, predictability, and can be a very reliable energy partner. So that's what I would say to those who look at the immediate future. I would say look at the plan we've put forward, look at the financial pillars that Canada is standing on, and look at the state of the world. And I think you would see that Canada is in a better place than most other G7 nations.
Thank you. And I see that Curtis has his hand raised now. So, and unmuted. Go for it, Curtis.
Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Sorry for the technical difficulties. I was wondering if you would support Stellantis using its Brampton plant to build Chinese EVs, and if you think that Leapmotor would be open to using Canadian parts firms for this manufacturing.
Well, let me be very clear when it comes to Stellantis, and I'll let the Minister of Industry to add to that. But since I was the one who negotiated at the time the agreement, what is the position of the Canadian government now is to insist on Stellantis respecting the letter and the spirit of the commitment they made to the government of Canada and to the workers of Stellantis in Brampton. That's the focus we have now. It's really to ensure that Stellantis would live up to the commitment, the contractual undertakings they have signed in respect of investment and in respect to the workers and in respect to the production in the plant that they have in Canada and particularly in Brampton. We were very clear at the time what were the expectation of the government of Canada when we supported Stellantis, and that's a commitment that I have seen my colleague, the Minister of Industry, speaking very clearly that we're going to hold their feet to the fire, and we're going to make sure that they respect their undertakings and the spirit of their undertakings, not only the letter, but also the spirit of their undertakings to the workers, to the community, and obviously to the government of Canada.
Thank you. How are we doing, Minister, timing-wise?
Well, let's take another one now. I know it's the last one they're saying because there's folks waiting on the other side, so they're going to be, if I extend too much, I'm going to get in trouble when I open the door.
Okay, so we'll go to Derek. Over to you. Please unmute yourself.
Derek, it's all yours.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, sir.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, just on finance, since you're there discussing financial services, what are the specific asks that you have of the Chinese government with relation to Canadian financial firms, Canadian pension funds and banks, and what asks do they have of Canada?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and thank you for that. A number of our insurance companies have already operating, like I said, in the Chinese market for quite some time. And some of them are looking, for example, to expand their licenses to offer more services in the Chinese market. So obviously this was something that we put on the table. You have a number of Canadian banks who also want to expand the type of services they can provide. I can think of Bank of Montreal, which already has some operation. National Bank of Canada has been issuing a Panda bond for some time, CIBC, RBC. So most of them are looking to expand the kind of services they provide or the partnership they have. So we had a very interesting discussion. We just came actually from a discussion where we had the CEO and the chairs of a number of financial institutions in China. And I think the reason which underpins that is that we are very conscious that first and foremost is that our financial institution and insurance companies have a great reputation in the Chinese market. Like I said, most of them have been operating here for decades. Secondly, if you want to expand your trade, you need financial services. You need to be able to provide that kind of services to the exporters that want to do more in the Chinese market. And thirdly, this is a very deep and liquid market. I mean, this is the second largest market for bonds, for example, bonds issuance in the world. So there is a lot of interest from Canadian financial institutions to see what more they can do in the Chinese market. So I think that the focus on financial services, the fact that I was here with the governor of the Bank of Canada, the superintendent of financial institution, sent a very strong signal. I met with the Minister of Finance today. We were with the governor of the Central Bank of China. I had the Vice Premier, which, as you know, is the one Vice Premier here, as being the one leading the discussions between China and the United States. So, the engagement we have is at the very highest level that you can find in the Chinese system. And the fact that we were here on a mission with the CEOs of many of these companies and representatives, I think it sends a very strong signal, like I said, that we are serious, we are focused, and we want to engage in a very pragmatic way. And the Financial Services Foundation is going to help us to achieve the increase of export from Canada to China by 50% by 2030. So I'm leaving Beijing tomorrow with the feeling that we have laid the foundation and we've really put in action the vision that was set forward by Prime Minister Carney during his summit with President Xi in January.
Thank you. Merci. Donc, je crois que ceci met fin à cet appel. Donc, merci à tout le monde d'avoir participé.
Happy Easter et puis joyeuse Pâques à tout le monde. Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very
On va
much.
maintenant fermer la ligne.